Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're covering a car that is extremely special to me, and that car is the E46 BMW M3. Now, the story behind this car and the reason why it's special to me is because this car behind me is my very own car, or used to be my very own car. That's right, I bought this car in 2004, brand new from a local BMW dealership, and it's been in my life ever since then. Now let me give you the story behind what this car is. This is a 2005 BMW M3. It's painted in carbon black and it's got a black interior. As it sits now, it's got about 140,000 miles and it's in a little bit of rough shape. Some of the paint isn't doing so well. Some of it is cracking here and it needs a little bit of brightening, let's say. And one of the things I'm tossing around is making this car a project car for the channel. So if that's something that interests you, send me a comment down below. But I put the Shelby GT350 to the side for a little bit, and I've been driving this E46 M3 for the past couple days. And in today's video, I'm going to review it for you. Let's start the video off by talking design. Outside of maybe the 507, the design from the early 2000s era is the pinnacle of all BMWs. Cars from this period seem like an evolution of the design from the beginning, maturing with each generation to look modern but still maintain that iconic BMW look. The E46 M3 is no different. When looked at, you think unequivocally BMW. Its clean lines and understated looks hold true to the test of time, and this car being equipped with a competition package and its 19-inch CSL-like wheels set the car off even further and adds to the sporty look of the already good-looking E46 Generation 3 Series Coupe. Even though I remain a fan of current BMW design, the look has evolved. I know this is subjective, but looking at the smooth flowing lines, circle headlights, and just the classic BMW look seems to be more pleasant to my eye. Okay, so now let's talk about one of the things that makes the E46 M3 so special, and that's found underneath this hood, the S54 inline 6-cylinder. Let's pop the hood and let me give you some details. But before I do that, contributing to the quote-unquote roughness of this car, let me give you an example. Here's the hood, I let go, starts coming down. So I'm gonna try and give you my best description while holding this hood up. All right, so the S54 engine is a derivative of the M54 inline 6-cylinder that BMW makes. Some people actually say that it's closer to the M50, but we're going into too much of this BMW coding and whatnot, so let's talk about this engine. 333 horsepower, 262 foot-pounds of torque, which was unreal at the time, with a 8,000 RPM redline. The S54 has a double Vanos camshaft system and a cast iron block, which is one of the reasons why people say this is more closely related to the S50. Now, another thing related to the S54 is that it has 6 individual throttle bodies for each cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 right underneath there. And that gives the S54 an unbelievable throttle response. Now, let's talk about a performance metric. 0 to 60, which is very popular now, which wasn't popular then, 4.8 seconds. Now, let me give you an idea of how unbelievable that time was. Back in '99 and in 2000, the 911 Carrera got 0 to 60, I believe, in 5 seconds. This was the base model. Now, for this car to be able to get 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, and I believe the base price for this car was around 50,000 or 51, 52,000, was unreal. Let's continue to talk about this marvel that is the S54. All right. One of the things that was noticeable to me throughout my ownership and even to this day is the engine and exhaust combination for the E46 M3. This S54 engine, contrary to many engines nowadays which are turbocharged, is naturally aspirated, and even as a naturally aspirated engine, it makes a lot of engine noise, specifically at idle, at startup, and even when you're driving. Now let me give you a demonstration of the engine startup and the exhaust. As you can see there with the exhaust, the M3 was infamous for the raspy exhaust. And I personally like rasp. Let me know in the comments below if you are a fan of rasp. Now going back to the engine noise, if you're familiar with our channel, we own a Shelby GT350, the one with a 5.2 liter flat plane crank engine. And that is also a high revving nature, but it's different than the S54 found in the M3 because that's not about engine noise. That I feel is more about exhaust noise, and it produces a great exhaust, don't get me wrong, but the S54 kind of takes a different approach, and I feel like it takes a little bit away from the exhaust with the rasp and the tame nature of it and dials in more engine noise, more intake noise, and I'll kind of go over that during the driving demonstration of the S54. But this is one of the things that makes the E46 M3 so special, is that S54 engine. Okay, now that we've talked about the exterior and the engine, now let's move to the interior, and I'm gonna warn you guys, it's a little rough in here, okay? So my armrest, you can see, is kind of falling apart. I've got seat covers on both of the seats because, as you can see, let me lift this here, it's a little rough in there. And I tried to do my best without spending a lot of money to put this thing on here, but hence the reason why this is a perfect candidate for a project car. Now let's get in and let's talk about the interior a little bit. And as you can see, this thing has the SMG, which many of you are going to scream boo boo to, but I'll give you my opinion on that here in a second. So let's go over the interior, starting off with this center screen. Let me give it some accessory power so it can turn on. And you've got this warning here that comes on, and this at the time was unreal. Having a screen specifically this size with this many features, onboard computer gives you the temperature outside, the range, your miles per gallon, your average speed. You can even set a speed limit if you wanted to. But one other cool thing is, let me see if this thing still works. I haven't tried it in years, but you press this button here and the screen even pops down. A single disc CD here, you push it, comes back up. Look at that, after all these years, it still works. Whoop, I guess not. Let's see if I can get this thing to stop. All right, second time's a charm. So let's move on from this and let's talk about the interior a little bit more. And starting off with the steering wheel. This being a competition package car, it has this one button here, and this trimming here you can see in carbon fiber is a vinyl that I've wrapped to make it look a little better than it does underneath. But the normal E46 M3 had steering wheel controls to raise and lower your volume and things like that. But in the competition model, you got this button here which allowed you to reduce the traction control and raise the ability for you to have a little bit more fun without completely turning the traction control off. Now you can see that I've got a steering wheel cover on this, and that is because the Alcantara that the competition package put on the steering wheel is completely shot. Look how terrible that looks, and one of the reasons why I don't like Alcantara anywhere on an interior. But this kind of makes it look decent. The hallmark of a BMW M car is the thickness of the steering wheel, and this does have a very thick steering wheel, which feels fantastic in the hands. This being an SMG car, I have paddle shifters, and in this one it's modified for these aluminum piece paddle shifters, which look fantastic and make a nice noise when you shift. Yeah, there you go. That sounds a lot more substantial than the plastic that it comes with. There is the gauge cluster, and in the E46 M3, let me give it some power here. You see this yellow right there? There is a warm-up the S54 goes through, and when you turn the car on, the lights are indicated up until 4,000 or 5,000, and then they eventually come down to this 8,000 point you see here, and that indicates that your engine is fully warmed up. Otherwise, the gauges are very clear and easy to read, and classic BMW from the time. Now let's move on to the rest of the interior. It's a very simple interior. Everything is functional. Your climate controls are down here, and in the competition package you've got like this aluminum piece of trimming, which surprisingly looks very good after all of these years. Moving down here, a lot of people make fun of this sport button, but this basically remaps the throttle sensitivity and gives you a lot more throttle response. And coming down here, of course, the SMG transmission. Here is the shift pattern. You've got neutral here, reverse, and the up-down indicators. Down is to shift up and up is to shift down. Some people don't like that, but that's the way it is. Here you've got the speed in which the SMG shifts the transmission gears. And then one other quirk, I guess you can call it, is it's got 4 switches. Now, why do you have 4 switches when you've only got a coupe, a 2-window car? And that's because the back windows in the E46 M3 tilt out. And this is one of my more favorite features in the E46 M3. This allows you to get more air circulation in if you don't want to lower your front windows. In addition to that, if you've got somebody sitting in the back seat, it allows them to get some more circulation back there and not be left out. So that's enough of the interior. Now let's go for a drive and let me give you my driving impressions. All right, guys, it's time for me to give you my driving impressions. And the first thing I wanted to demonstrate, and so this is something that I had forgotten that was so wonderful about the M3, and that is the visibility. The visibility out in every single direction. It's most notable when you're looking out in front of you. Now, let me see if I can demonstrate that. I've got my other GoPro here, and I'm in a parking lot because I wanted somewhere to demonstrate this safely without endangering anybody. But here I am, and what I wanted to demonstrate here is you can't really see the hood. Look at the line here. That's pretty much all I can see. If I lift up a little bit, there's the hood, I see it. But if I come down to my eye level, which is right here, I can't see anything, and my seat isn't really that high up, and it's just at a normal setting. But the visibility out in front of you in the E46 M3 is great. In addition to that, out the side view, very few, if any, blind spots. The mirror positioning is absolutely wonderful, and seeing out the sides is great as well, because you've got these mirrors back here, which help a lot when you're looking over your shoulder for the passenger side. And in addition to that, here on the driver's side, what would this be? The B pillar is actually very far back, and you can see everything outside. Now I'm going to get out of the parking lot and get on to the driving portion. All right, so I'm on the road now, and let's talk about how this thing feels to drive. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the steering feel. The E46 M3 has hydraulic steering. It is not electronically assisted, which means a couple things. One good thing is that you feel everything. It's very communicative. Everything underneath you, some of the bumps in the road, all of that stuff is felt through the steering wheel, which is one of the most notable things about having hydraulic steering. Now, on the opposite end, because this does not have hydraulic steering, it does not have variable steering sensitivity. And the E46 M3 has very heavy steering. And the bad side of that means that you always have heavy steering. So even at low speeds like I'm at now, the steering feels heavier than it would in a electronic steering car, where the steering feel lightens and gets heavier based off of the speed that you're traveling. But I can't say that it's bad to where I can't drive it on a daily basis. This is more than acceptable. It's not bad, and it's not something you're going to get annoyed by. All right, and the next thing is the engine. This being a relatively low torque engine, you've got 262 foot-pounds of torque, which compared to cars nowadays is actually pretty low. And when you combine that with the fact that this is a high revving engine, it means that you have to rev it out. You have to really work the engine to get a lot of the feel or a lot of the sensation that you're going fast, because typically high revving engines, you've got to rev them out, much like the Shelby GT350. The E46 M3 is kind of like that. I've never really felt that it's lacking in torque down low. Right now I'm in 4th gear at 40 miles an hour, and I'm driving on a regular street, and it feels totally adequate. It's not to a point where I feel like it's missing any type of torque down low, but I know that's something that a lot of people like to complain about. But let me tell you, the engine is still a marvel. It sounds great. It's one of those things that it puts a smile on your face, much like the Shelby GT350 does for me. And every time I drive an engine like the S54, a car like the BMW M3 that has the high revving nature, the fact that you have to work the engine to get the full pleasure out of the driving experience, I'm never left disappointed. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the transmission. The M3 came with 2 different transmissions, a 6-speed manual and a 6-speed SMG, which this car has. Now, the SMG is one of the most criticized things about this generation of the M3. Now, before I get into the reasons why the SMG transmission isn't really the preferred transmission in this car, let me talk about what it actually is. The SMG is the same transmission as you would find in the 6-speed. They both have 6 speeds. The transmission itself, the gearbox, is the same. They're identical. The only difference with the SMG is because you don't have a clutch pedal, it's somewhat of an automated manual. There is a SMG pump, or a computer operated pump, that controls the clutch pedal movement. Now, every time you pull on this paddle shifter, that pump is reenacting the depressing of the clutch pedal, the shifting of the gear, and then the releasing of the clutch. So that is the fundamental difference between the 6-speed equipped E46 M3 and the SMG equipped E46 M3. Let me explain to you why I think it's not that bad as many people say it is. One of the things I really like about the SMG is that it offers a manual-like feel. And let me explain that. Because the fact that this is indeed a 6-speed manual gearbox connected to that computer, there is a little bit of shift delay, and that in and of itself, in my opinion, makes it feel like a manual transmission. Allow me to demonstrate. Let me get my other GoPro here, and I'm going to use this to show you what I mean by the shift delay. So right now I'm in the 3rd transmission mode, or the 3rd shift speed mode, and I'm going to shift into 3rd gear. You see how that light blinked? And the transmission basically did its thing. That's what I'm talking about. This is kind of the feeling you get from a manual transmission. So here we go again, from 3rd gear to 4th gear. See how it kind of blinks and it thinks, the revs drop, and then it picks up the gear again? I feel like you don't get this in an automatic or a double clutch transmission. So here's some gas. Yeah, it still feels good, guys. It's the engine, the S54 engine makes the experience very fun. The high revving nature of it is still great and engaging to drive after all of these years. But that's pretty much my opinion of the E46 M3. And that is the review of the E46 M3. Let me know in the comments below if you would be interested in making this a project car. We would modify this car and bring it up to par. But driving this car brought back a lot of memories for me, a lot of good memories, and it reminded me what an amazing, amazing car the E46 BMW M3 really is. Thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.